Hello, I am an amateur photographer that lives in South Florida, and I mostly shoot sports and wildlife. In my previous video, I documented my journey of using my Canon camera and lenses for taking Milky Way pictures, and how I started getting interested in deep sky objects like nebula and galaxies. The last major step in my journey is to upgrade from my Canon zoom lens to a dedicated telescope. And in this video, I'd like to review the telescope that I ended up using. There are a lot of different vendors out there that have quality telescopes. William Optics is a very popular one. Askar is another one. The different telescopes will run around $1,500 for an 80mm or a focal length of 600 millimeters. When I started looking at the different vendors of telescopes, I discovered that ZWO has a new line of telescopes that they just came out with. My background in sports and wildlife photography led me to want to get the biggest telescope that I could afford. And one of the ones I was looking at was the new ZWO 107. That has a focal length of about 750 millimeters. Little pricey for my budget, but again, I was looking at the best I could get at that time. And unfortunately, the 107 was back ordered because of supply issues, but the 80 millimeter was available. And what's interesting is that this turned out to be a good thing, because the 80 millimeter ZWO telescope has a focal length of 600 millimeters, and with the optional reducer, you can bring it down to about 450 millimeters. And the reason why that turned out to be a good thing is, as a newbie, I primarily am going to be taking pictures of some of the more popular objects in the sky, like the Andromeda Galaxy. And with astronomy tools, if I put in that I'm using a 400 millimeter telescope, you can see that I'm just at the edges of the arms of the galaxy. And so if I had gone with the 107, let's say 750 millimeters, I would be cutting off a good portion of the galaxy, and so this really wouldn't be an object that I could shoot. But with the ZWO 80 millimeter, which has a 600 millimeter focal length, I can put on this reducer and take pictures of Andromeda. The Horsehead Nebula, again at 600 millimeters, using astronomy tools, I can tell that I can really get a nice composition. So some objects, obviously a bigger focal length is going to be necessary, like the Pinwheel Galaxy, but for the majority of the nebula, this is a really sweet spot to be in. And so it actually turned out to be a good thing that I ended up testing out the 80 millimeter ZWO telescope. Who's going to be buying it? Well, this is what's interesting, is that when it comes to computer equipment, let's say, people will go all in with Apple or with Samsung. They'll get the same tablet brand as their phone, as an example. People will get a Mac and an iPad and an iPhone, an iWatch. They'll go all in with a vendor. With astrophotography, it can be a mixed match. The thing to keep in mind, though, is that if you do go ZWO and you use their Air Plus as a control unit, you have to use their brand of camera. If you use the Air Plus as your control unit, you don't have to use the ZWO telescope, of course. This is brand new, and so most people that use the Air Plus aren't going to have the ZWO telescope. And if you use the ZWO telescope, you do not have to use a ZWO camera, so you can mix and match. But I think the majority of people who are going to be looking at this new line of telescopes are going to be people like myself that already have the Air Plus, they already have a ZWO camera, and they just end up going all in with ZWO products. My initial impression when I opened up the new ZWO FF80mm telescope is that it has excellent build quality. It looks very nice. It doesn't come with a case, however. Only the supply box. And after about 2 months of using it, it started falling apart. And so, because ZWO doesn't offer any kind of carry case, optional carry case that you can buy, eventually I'm going to have to get a hard case with a foam insert to protect the telescope. It also doesn't come with a focus mask. Not a big deal. I went on eBay and picked up a 3D printed focus mask for about $5, so that wasn't a big deal. The tubes that come with the telescope can take a 2-inch filter, so you don't have to buy a filter tray to use a filter. However, in order to get the filter in this in your imaging train, you've got to turn off the camera, disconnect it, unscrew this tube, insert the filter or remove it depending on what you want to do, and then put it all back together again. So it's not easy to swap out filters or remove a filter in the middle of an imaging session, because you do have to take it all apart. So if you are going to be switching between filters or not using a filter, I would recommend picking up an optional ZWO filter tray. The first problem I had is that this was the first telescope that I've ever used. So the first thing I did when I opened it up is I took my ZWO camera and connected it to the back of the telescope and tried taking some pictures. The problem is I couldn't get a focus. And the reason why I couldn't get a focus is that you have to use the included tubes to move the camera far enough away from the end of the telescope so that you can get focus. So then I tried to take the tubes and attach it to the back of the telescope, and you can't do that. What you have to do is take this end ring off, then you can connect the tubes, then you can connect the camera, and then you can proceed to start taking pictures. The included documentation includes this picture, which is, if I had known, explains how you're supposed to assemble and use the telescope. Again, being the first telescope I ever bought, I didn't understand what this image meant, but once I put it together, I was able to move forward. Next problem I had was with the guide scope. So you can see this upper bracket on the telescope. It has some Allen wrench nuts that you have to remove. Then this plate can be removed. You can attach your guide scope and then reassemble it. The ZWO guide scope that I have with the ZWO guide scope camera, there's a single bolt that you use to attach. And because it has a single bolt, if it becomes even a little bit loose, it's going to be free to wiggle and you're going to have trouble tracking. And the annoying thing is that in order to retighten this, you've got to take all this apart, tighten it, and put it all back together again. And I found that very annoying. So instead what I did is I mounted my guide scope to the plate holder where I originally had put my Air Plus, and instead I got some Velcro so I could attach my Air Plus to my mount down here like you see over here. So this is how I'm working currently with my guide scope attached here, and like I said, my Air Plus is just Velcro to my mount here, and then you can see all my cords are loose so that as I move around, my cords are long enough that they don't tangle up and get caught on anything. In South Florida, the summer months are very difficult for astrophotography. Even if there isn't a cloud in the sky, it's so humid that there's turbulence in the upper atmosphere and it gets hazy, and it's very difficult to image during the summer months. And so usually the winter is the prime time. It's not as humid, and it's nice and cool out, so there's not as many mosquitoes in the air. But this winter, it's been clouds after clouds after clouds after clouds, and the only time it seems that we've had any clear nights is when we've had a full moon. And so I've had the telescope for about 3 months now, and I haven't been able to use it that much because of the bad weather we've been having. But we did have a clear night, and I was able to go out, and this is the first image that I took with the telescope. This is the Heart Nebula. It's a 2-hour exposure, and maybe about an hour in post-processing. Very happy with this image. This is the first time I ever was able to shoot the Heart Nebula, and again, first time with the telescope, and very happy that I was able to capture this image. Obviously, something like the Heart Nebula really needs a good 4 to 5 hours to get an excellent image, but for first time out, this was really awesome. After I shot this, I turned my attention to the Orion Nebula, and that's when clouds came in. Astrophyric is famous for being a little bit off down in South Florida, because it'll say it's clear, but being so close to the coast, clouds can roll in at a moment's notice. And so I was prepared to do a 2-hour picture of Orion, but clouds came in, and unfortunately I had to stop. So this is only half an hour in Andromeda, with Orion. Didn't get a chance to do calibration frames before I had to pack up, so there are some artifacts here that you can see. But half an hour picture, about 15 minutes in Photoshop, and you can see, I mean, it's not bad, but it could be a lot better. A few weeks later, we had another clear night. This time, the problem was it was during the full moon. And so I was racing to get this image before the full moon rose and washed everything out. So this is 60 minutes this time. And you can see it's a little bit better. I've got better exposure here of the nebula. Again, only 15 minutes in Photoshop. I need to work on my post-processing. Probably mask out the highlights here so it's not as washed out here. But for an hour image, this isn't bad. So what's my final verdict of the new ZWO 80mm telescope? It's a great telescope. I had trouble getting started because it was the first time I had used the telescope. Very pleased with the build quality and the quality of the glass. The telescope doesn't need a flattener or have back focus issues because of the way it's been designed. And this would work fine with non-ZWO cameras and control units or using a laptop. But I think the majority are going to be people like myself that already have ZWO equipment and are just going all in with ZWO. It would be nice if they offered a hard case that would fit their equipment. The telescope camera, the guide scope camera, all the cords. Like I said, I think the majority of people buying this telescope are going to be existing customers of ZWO, so it would be nice if they had a case. But not a big deal that you can get these cases now with U-Pluck foam inserts, so you can pull out the foam to fit your equipment however you want, and then you spray the foam with like silicone so it doesn't come apart. But I think if they offered a case, people would buy it. My final summary: ZWO makes astrophotography fun. I have a lot of fun with this. I was able to get much better images than I did with my Canon camera and lens. Very happy with it. disappointed with how our weather has been, and I'll probably make a follow-up video once we do get some extended periods of clear skies. But I did want to get this posted and let people know how well this telescope worked out for me. Thank you.